Today we're going to talk about how and when to pivot to keep your business viable. And here to talk about that is Jim Beaty. He is the founder of Backstage Music in Starkville. And as music stores go, he's been around a while. Jim, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
So take us back. You're a young musician and you got this great idea to start a music store. I think every musician wants to do that, but you guys actually opened not just one, but a couple of stores.
Yeah, we did. My original partner and I were working sort of a split shift, as it were, at a mom and pop music store in Columbus, Mississippi. Actually, it was just a mom. Pop had died, and so the two of us were running it for her. And she offered to sell it to us. We didn't like the numbers. We thought Starkville needed a store, so we sort of blindly decided to open one up. Didn't really do our market research or anything else. We just signed a lease and said, okay, let's go get some money and some gear. And that's how it started.
And so was it easier back then? I know there are challenges these days with getting certain lines, but back then, were you doing the usual Gibson, Fender, and how did you go about acquiring those lines?
It's really pretty funny. When we started, we had aspirations of picking up a lot of major lines. We contacted PB. They said, no, we don't open brand new stores. We called Fender. They said essentially the same thing. We called Music Man, which at the time was a pretty big line. They said the same thing. We called Gibson. They said, how much money do you have? We'll take it all. And that's how we got started.
So what were the first lines that you carried then? And how did you grow that?
Well, of course, Gibson had some other things connected at the time, Lab Series amps, Epiphone acoustics. We were lucky to pick up Pearl drums direct. Takamine guitars, we're still a dealer for Takamine. That's probably the oldest line we've carried as far as continuous dealership. But back then, everything was very territorial. If there was a dealer nearby physically, then chances are you weren't going to get it unless the population could sustain it. And of course, in Mississippi, that was never the case. But most of the geographic area was pretty laid out so that if we saw something we wanted, generally we weren't butting heads with any other dealers. I think there were a couple of shops in Columbus, of course, something in Tupelo, but we were pretty wide open back then. It was just a matter of what we thought might be the best for our mix. So that's how we began the thing back in 1978.
So I think every musician has this sort of romantic notion of what it's like working at the music store, right? You know, you're down there at the music store because it's a place where everybody wants to hang out. Contrast that with the reality of getting out of bed every day and making a music store work. So what was that education like for you, and how do you compare it with whatever notion you had of what a music store was going to be like?
Well, it seemed like there were a lot of wake-up calls along the way because, like you said, it was sort of a glamorous idea to, hey, let's take this passion for music and turn it into a business and, you know, a career, and we can make this work because we're musicians. Yes and no. I didn't really have formal business training. My undergraduate degree is in psychology. Thank you. But we just decided to dig in, learn on the job, so to speak, and the only thing I could say is everyone makes mistakes in business, especially when they start. We were very fortunate early on that none of those mistakes were fatal. There were some rough times on the front end due to the fact that neither of us had significant business experience or training, other than a bit of time in retail at a small store. But we were able to overcome the minor mishaps, I guess you'd say, and continue to grow. We opened a second store in Columbus in 1981, took on another partner. That continued on for a number of years, bought a couple of buildings downtown in Columbus, as a matter of fact. But at some point in the early 90s, we decided that it was going to be best to sort of pull it back a bit. I actually went from a three-man partnership to a sole proprietor at that point, and decided just to pull it back to Starkville. I brought in a new partner in Alan McBroom, who I'm still with today, and we sort of redesigned the business. His focus became more and more on retail, mine more and more on contracting. And honestly, I think what we're going to get into in this conversation is, for us and probably any business, diversification is really key, especially when you're a small market business. We began being all things to all people. PA installations, which grew also into video installations, which grew into camera installations. We began renting instruments. We probably got 1,000 rental instruments out now. Stepped up our repair facilities. We have a guy in the house, Tony Foster, who's by far the best guitar tech within 300 miles. We've got clients from 10 states that send their stuff in for Tony to work on it.
Let's talk about how you layered those things in. So first, you're the mom and pop music store, right? So let's go back to the early days. What was it like having musicians as employees? Because they can be a little quirky, but you need them in there, because when someone comes in, they want to talk to the guitar slinger in town about what guitar to get. So let's start there. What was it like having musicians as employees?
You know, it's kind of interesting because we always maintained that we were going to be the only place you could work. If you had a gig, we'd work that out so you could make the gig. That was always a problem if you worked at the shoe store or whatever. And most of the time it was okay, but, you know, occasionally there would be a headbutt situation where I'd have to go play somewhere. My partner would have to go play somewhere. The couple of guys we had working for us had a gig that night. I mean, who's going to keep the place open on Saturday? And so, yeah, we had to kind of stumble through that a little bit because everybody, with very few exceptions, everyone who's ever been on our payroll is a musician. I can think of a couple of guys that came in, they just had other qualities that we liked, so they went to work for us, and actually they became musicians along the way. But, you know, I think there's a little fire that burns in every musician, obviously, for the performance, creativity, and so forth. And that passion really comes through in retail. I mean, and that's still what we hang our hat on, I guess you'd say. When people come in, they want to be able to talk to a musician and get that information that you're just not going to get from somebody who's not a player. So I think it's credibility as much as anything else.
So what was the first pivot you made, or the first thing you added that wasn't strictly retail, and why did you head that direction?
Well, I can remember this pretty well. We were selling guitars, amplifiers, drum sets, keyboards, PA systems. A club owner bought a significant PA system. He said, "Now, can you bring it down here, deliver it, and install it?" And we said, "Install it? You mean like nail it up on the walls and make sure all the wiring works and everything?" He said, "Yeah." We said, "Well, that'll take like ladders and stuff. I don't know if we could do that." He said, "Well, you should come give it a try." And we did. And nothing fell down and nobody died. And so we decided this was something we should get into. So we parlayed that into a very significant portion of the business, so much so that now that's almost all I do is oversee the audio and visual contracting leg.
And when did churches become a part of that mix? Because you do a good bit of church work, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Churches are a high percentage, maybe 60 to 70% of our contract business. Early on, I mean, you know, once we found out that we could install a sound system, I mean, it's hard to find a church that doesn't have one, right? Whether they're big or small. And we just took on more and more responsibility and more intricate projects along the way, and reputation grew. I think the word of mouth helped a lot on that. Because those folks do talk to each other. So we were fortunate to be able to make that part of the business, as I said, a significant contributor to the overall package of what we do.
So, and how did you start out? What was your marketing strategy, advertising strategy, and how did that also morph as you changed, where you weren't pitching just the guitar player or the drummer, but a church? I mean, you said word of mouth, but did you do any actual marketing or advertising to those folks?
Yeah, we did. You know, there were some publications at the time that were centered toward that. We would actually, I remember taking an ad out of the Baptist Record, which was a newspaper that went out to everyone who was a member of the Baptist Church, it seems like, and that's going to cover a lot of this state anyway. But we did a lot of direct mail. We developed a pretty good mailing list for contacts at churches, and we would send out promotions that way. This was all kind of pre-internet, 80s and early 90s. And of course, that's changed dramatically now. But we did a lot of direct mail, not as much in radio, TV, newspaper kind of thing. But that found was an effective tool for us.
When did you first get a glimmer that the internet might be a beast to be reckoned with?
I think it was early 2000s. We began seeing the growth. You know, in our industry, there's always been catalog sellers. You know, where you could get significantly discounted product by calling this toll-free number and talking to a salesman, and get it out of the warehouse and send it to you. Well, that turned into an internet seller. You know, and I can remember specifically there was a company called Musician's Friend, and it was not music store owner's friend, but they had a huge footprint in the early days of internet sales. And we railed against it. I mean, it was Don Quixote and the windmill, you know, we're going to fight this thing.
When you say fight, what do you mean? What do you mean by fight? When you say fight?
Well, I mean, you know, exactly. What did I mean by fight? This thing was coming like a freight train, and we complained a lot about it. And we said it's not fair, the sales tax thing, yada, yada, yada. But then we said, you know, maybe we ought to give this a little bit of a try. We're just a little store in nowhere, but we could see if maybe a presence there would help. So we developed a website where you could, we didn't really jump fully into e-commerce at the time, but we developed a website where you could contact us and get some orders on it. It was very slow. But again, that's something that just grew over time. We're now have our entire inventory tied in on platforms, maybe 6 or 8 different platforms. And of course, Amazon. There's a site called reverb.com, which is strictly for musical instrument sales. You know, quite a bit of stuff on eBay with a store, and our own website's fairly active as well. To the point now where we're pushing out anywhere from 25 to, on a good day, 100 boxes, you know, so we're moving product there.
So with the internet, one attraction was the convenience factor, but the other one was the price. And so how did you guys decide to combat that? Because if you're going to strictly do price, it's going to be a race to the bottom. And so how did you guys figure out where to position yourselves on the price point?
Well, actually, our industry was fairly proactive in that. You'll find this if you do any shopping at all for musical instruments, that most of the major stuff has a fairly consistent price across legitimate vendors. That's known in our industry as minimum advertised price, or MAP. A lot of dealers will tell you that stands for maximum asking price, but I guess that's the same thing. We decided to buy into that because we said, you know, just trying to puff this $99 thing up and get $129 or $139 isn't going to work, because kids were coming in with a cell phone and taking a picture of our piece that we'd have on the floor and comparing it with their, you know, internet options. And if we weren't right on, we didn't stand a chance. So we just decided the margins were a little tougher to go that way, but that made us competitive, and we would have to turn to other revenue streams to make up the difference. And we've been really fortunate in developing those, as I mentioned earlier, rental, repair, certainly contracting, and a few other things.
So the musical instrument rental was relatively new for you. You've been in it a couple years now, and normally the model was some former band director usually gets in his car and he's got his buddies and he hits all the schools up. I don't think anyone maybe looked at the margins because it was pretty lucrative. So you guys decided to check that out. So tell me what that process was like.
Wow, this thing had been hanging around for years. We would have parents come into the shop and say, I just came from band night at the school. My 7th grader wants to play trumpet. Do you have any idea how much it costs to run a trumpet? We're like, well, no, because we don't do that. But after a long time of hearing this, and it was usually the conversation ended with, well, you guys should get into it. You can do better than that, probably. We affiliated with a company in Florida, actually, who provides the instruments. We sort of serve as a clearinghouse for that. But we're able to do exactly the same instruments that the local directors require for a substantially lower price. It's just a matter of overhead. You know, they don't have a route salesman. They just have us, and we're already open door. So we do a little bit of paperwork, put the instrument in the customer's hand. The company handles the money end of it, and we see a commission. If there's a repair problem, they bring it to us. We give them a loaner, and we send that unit back for repair. It comes back. We swap it back through. In other words, we're an agent, and it's just, you want to call it a little bit of gravy money, that's fine. But you know, if your kid wants to be in the band, do you want to pay $25 a month for a horn? Or you want to pay $75 a month for the same horn? Easy choice.
So you guys have not only managed to pivot several times and survive, but you're also in some ways thriving. I mean, you've been recognized by your industry organization. So tell us about that.
Yeah, we have been a longtime member of the National Association of Music Merchants, or NAM, as it's affectionately known. They have two big shows a year. There's a January show normally held in Anaheim. COVID has taken care of that, of course. And the summer show's in Nashville. We typically go to the Nashville show just because it's closer. I've been to the Anaheim show a couple of times. It's a lot of fun, but whatever. But they have an award called the 100 Best Music Stores, you know, if you want to call it that. And there's a bit of an application that you have to fill out. You have to present some information in terms of what you contribute to our industry. And they have a panel, and we've actually won that award. Well, we just heard about it about a month ago, 4 years straight now. We've been in the top 100 music stores, and this is a worldwide designation, although most of the stores are certainly in the U.S. Winning that 4 times in a row is pretty heady stuff because there's literally thousands of stores to consider.
Well, you're doing some things, though, that I guess if you talked about them in a class at a business school, they'd say, well, why would you do that? I mean, you let folks come in and sell their own stuff and keep it. You have a day where folks can bring in their old gear and sell it. What's the thought process behind that?
Well, more than anything, and this goes back to us being part of this fabric locally for 40 plus years now, the give back is really important. You can't simply be a taker. There has to be some giving involved too. One of the things that you mentioned, what we call our spring cleaning sale, we literally turn the front of the store or the parking lot into a flea market, invite anybody to come and sell anything they want to sell related to music with no commission on our end. We actually provide the coffee and the donuts and the background music and a little bit of entertainment, and it's a nice little happening. And yeah, there's some folks that wander in the store and buy stuff. We're of course open, so that's a plus. But better than anything, it's really good PR. We've recently started a new program, and I don't know that there's another one of these out there at all, called Safe Dock, where if you order an instrument from any vendor online, you can have it shipped to our store, which is a commercial location. We'll accept it for you, and you can come by there and pick it up instead of having it delivered to your house or your apartment where it could sit out there and be vulnerable to theft or whatever. And we've had some people take advantage of that. Again, it's just doing the right thing for the music community.
What do you think the future is for mom and pop retail in general, music stores in particular, but mom and pops in general?
I think, as you use the term, pivoting is important. I think we've seen a lot of them that are reluctant to change the way they do things, and that's too bad because agility is super important these days. Things change quickly, and you've got to be able to maneuver with those changes. As far as our industry per se, I always like to think it's still kind of a tactile thing. You know, there's still a good feeling about going into a music store and pulling a guitar down and playing it and hearing it and smelling it and all that stuff. Yeah, you can certainly order one. You can order from us or you can order from somebody else, but nothing beats a test drive. and we like to have that. We like to have that interaction in our store with customers. So,
Well, I want to congratulate you on decades. Wow, decades of success, and really appreciate you taking the time to share that with our students. Thank you, Jim Beaty.
sure, it's been a lot of fun, and honestly, I haven't done a very good job of developing a retirement structure on this too. I've been doing it for 42 years, and heck, I'll probably still be doing it for a bit more. Do I look like I'm worn out yet?